All right, welcome folks to another episode of the DTC Hotline, your direct link to advice on everything e-commerce. Call or text 866-DTC-2263 to get all of your burning e-com questions answered. You can leave a voicemail, you can leave a text asking whatever's on your mind. Our operators are standing by. And speaking of which, we've got them both with us today, coming live from sunny Southern California, CTC HQ. Well, actually, I should say in this particular instance, Tony is coming to us from, where are you coming to us from, Tony?
Southeast Michigan.
Southeast Michigan. So sunny Southeast Michigan, Mr. Tony Chopp the Chopper, and from CTC HQ, Luke the Weatherman Austin. How are you guys doing?
I'm here for the hot takes, Richard. I'm ready. I'm locked in.
It's already heating up in here. Tony's got the sunglasses on.
Yeah.
I've got the AC cranked down in the office. But yeah, we're excited. We got coming from the office. Tony's basically coming from the Orange County of the Midwest. We're all in a good mood here. Got the Hawaiian shirts of sorts. We're ready for the questions.
Yeah. We're clarifying that Luke's shirt is more of a quote vacation shirt, in that it's sort of linen and comfortable. But I don't know. We'll get him in a Hawaiian one of these days.
I think that my understanding of the attire was under the category of vacation button-ups. So we're all wearing vacation button-ups.
There you go. All right. Well, whatever gets us in the mindset. So let me just quickly say a couple words about how this works. We get questions from listeners, as well as questions from members of Admission, which is our eComm training subscription service. I hear a common thread. And then we let Luke and Tony off the leash. We let them answer these questions, give you their hot takes, and give you their answers. So let's pop to our first question of this week, which is a question that was actually asked of you recently, Tony, and I'm interested to hear both of your take on it, which is one we get a lot. What do you do when nothing works? Now, this is specific to the Meta Ads account, of course, but what do you do when nothing works?
Start a new business. No, just kidding. Hot take. No, this one was interesting. I think I feel like the answer is like kind of boring, but it was this is the thing. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about in CTC's general POV is really applicable for really large advertisers with a lot of media spend. And I think this comes up in conversations with the Admission community where we have smaller investments. So this particular brand was, number one, a lower AOV, which puts a lot of pressure on the whole system in general. And number two, a smaller advertising budget. So you'll hear us talk about like 7-day click attribution as the way to do it. I think it's important to like think about like, yeah, that's cool if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in media to invest. But if you don't, you probably don't have enough signal for that. So that's like a thing where you got to look at expanding the amount of signal that you have. I think, Richard, if I recall from the conversation, we're like, yeah, let's get some 7-day click and 1-day view in there to get more signal. And one is not right or wrong. It just means you got to think differently about how you set the targets. So I don't know. What do you think, Luke?
I would say the first thing that I want to understand within the context of the feeling or perspective of nothing's working is separating out the symptom versus the disease in the situation. To understand the things that we're looking at that we're saying aren't working, most likely indicated by specific data points or metrics or comparisons of data sets against one another or year-over-year comps. It's important to understand which of the things that aren't working or that are showing up negative in that scenario are symptoms versus the actual sort of disease or sickness that's causing the issue at a root level. An example that would be our ROAS on Meta or our CAC on Meta has been month by month degrading in efficiency. We've been seeing consistent declines in efficiency, and our ability to spend at volume, the volume has been decreasing as well. So we're seeing less volume and we're seeing lower efficiency. Let's go solve for Meta ROAS. How do we fix Meta ROAS or Meta CAC? Well, in that case, this is a recent example or conversation of where this has come up, where if you take 2 steps back, then what you start to see for the business is returning customer revenue is down year over year pretty substantially. So our returning customers aren't coming back at the same clip as they were. Our conversion rate on our brand search campaigns for our core branded terms is down substantially year over year. And the key metric leading to the degradation of efficiency on Meta is the conversion rate is also down. The other metrics look solid. So in that case, what we're doing is immediately you can kind of go for, okay, we got to go fix our Meta ROAS and Meta CAC. But when you take a step out and look at both your customer cohorts, returning and new, and then each of your channels, and when you start to see things like returning customer revenues down year over year, brand search conversion rate is down year over year, the conversion rate on our email channel, we're getting less revenue from, you start to uncover broader foundational impacts to the business that are affecting every channel that are the core thing to solve for. And an example of what those could be is competitor bidding has increased substantially across platforms, and there's much higher discounting from retailers. And so what's happening is across Google this year versus last year, you have a swarm of other retailers that are selling the product at 20, 30% discounted rates relative to yours. And you also have more competitors that have entered the space because it's easier than ever to start a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business or launch a product. So you have more competition, and you have a leaky bucket in the bottom of your funnel because they're taking the demand away. That's one very specific example, and it could go down the other ways. But what I'd say is get clear on what the actual thing is that's causing the symptoms that you're seeing show up in other places, and then go solve for that thing, because that's the foundational challenge to solve for, that's going to then dissipate to every single channel.
Yeah. So, essentially, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one more thing. I remember the conversation. The guy we were talking to was saying, we're cranking on TikTok, which is sort of the opposite of what we often encounter. A lot of times that channel can be harder to unlock. To Luke's point about like being more specific, I'm using words like cranking and like things are cooking. So it's all definitely pretty general, and I didn't ask them in that conversation at admission, like what type of signal or attribution or whatever else they were using over on TikTok, which would be an interesting question. But yeah, I think like to Luke's point around the general statement of nothing is working is sort of problematic as a foundational starting point.
Right. No, I think that's a good point. Like maybe a way to summarize it is oftentimes, this question gets asked with the context of my Meta ad account is not working. What tweak should I make in Meta to make it work? Or oftentimes the response to that would be something like more creative or whatever, and that may be the case. But I think part of what you're saying is like, well, the fact that like that's not working indicates that something else entirely may be happening that has nothing to do with the platform, and that's the thing that you need to diagnose before you actually kind of resign yourself to the idea that nothing works on Meta or something like that.
That's exactly right. And there may be instances where you're seeing other channels or customer cohorts underperform because of other reasons, and the answer is actually launch a bunch of new creative on Meta, continue to scale there because you have to make up the gap elsewhere, right? So it doesn't redirect the responsibility in that way. But if we're losing out on demand relative, if we're not spending enough on in our core branded search and shopping campaigns and have comprehensive covering of the SERP related to our core search terms, then it's just going to continue to perpetuate to some way. Whereas the resources in that case maybe go towards solving that problem, and then the effects of that are seen across your other channels as well.
Cool. All right, let's jump to our next question here. So partially because you brought up TikTok. So one question that had kind of come out of that same session was our creative is going off on TikTok, but we're not getting the same reaction on Meta. And it sounds like part of your answer to that was just around like check the attribution settings. But if you are in that position where one channel you appear to be having serious creative success, but on the other, it's completely dead. Generally speaking, what's happening?
So step one, standardize the signal in which you're assessing the platforms in, which you referenced, Richard, which is look at everything through the lens of incremental contribution or IROAS to the business. We can't take any action prior to that because the incremental impact you're reading is going to be very different for each of these channels. So step one, standardize the measurement. Look at either by using incrementality benchmarks based on a data set of tests that we have access to and some of the other partners have access to, or running your own tests, which is the preferred method, but get to a place where you have a better apples to apples comparison, the true incremental impact of each of these channels, that then you can know what sort of gap you're actually sussing out.
Yeah, I think the thought that had popped in my mind is it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that, let's say you launch on TikTok and you find early success. It's like a snowball effect. You feed it more budget, you feed the pixel, ends up with more conversion data, the audience's targeting gets sharper, et cetera, et cetera. So it sort of accelerate it. The starting point, I think, matters for the perception of the acceleration, right? This thing got going and then it started cooking and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And in some ways, that experience of that self-fulfilling prophecy might be like something that's coloring your experience of Meta, which is proving to be more challenging and leading you to the conclusion that nothing is working or it's all not working. So what I would offer is that the way that I think about really any channel is it's a matter of committing to it. It's not, does this work or is this not going to work? It's, we're going to figure out how to make this channel work. A function of that is what Luke talked about in getting the incrementality measurement right. A function of that is making an ongoing, consistent, persistent investment in media and creative development to get into the party, so to speak. And literally every advertising activity is incremental to some degree, whether it's going and talking to your mom about the product, and that's like, probably a pretty easy sale and like highly incremental, versus a billboard on the 405 or US 23 if we're in Michigan, which is going to sort of have a lower incrementality or wider reach. But it's just about, like, if you want to be an advertiser that advertises on billboards, well, stake your claim, go and figure out the math behind it, and it may or may not, like, let me say it this way, every single one of those endeavors is going to have a different acceleration feeling and cycle to it.
Yeah. So let's talk about, just because we're on the subject here of secondary channels anyway, a question that we got recently was, what is our view, generally speaking, on secondary channels like TikTok, Pinterest, Snapchat, etc.? Now, I know this is something that we've talked about in other content before, but I think it'd be good to kind of get a sense of what you guys, maybe what I should say is, what's your hot take on secondary channels right now?
So I have a hot take. I think people expand. I think people expand way too early. Mm-hmm. But this is different than saying expansion is wrong, because it's not. But I think a lot of businesses that we interact with are putting energy into expansion when there's still quite a bit of room to go through Meta and Google primarily.
Yeah, what's your take, Luke?
Yeah, I agree with that. Getting to, I think it's a worthwhile exercise for brands to think about, how can I become a 9-figure direct-to-consumer e-commerce business just through Meta and Google, and focus on that. And then at like the more nuanced then approach would be, okay, then there's probably points at different times based on your resourcing, et cetera, that you could expand out. But putting it that way of, how do we get to $100 million D2C eComm through Meta and Google, and becoming there is enough volume, there is enough impressions, there's enough to be able to grow through those channels, in addition to things that you do on email and own channels, et cetera. But in terms of acquisition advertising channels, getting to 9 figures on Meta and Google, and building the organizational structure and resource investment and alignment with that will allow you to capture as much of the opportunity as possible relative to the platforms, prior to then expanding and going elsewhere. Because to Tony's point, many cases we'll see you're like, it's, you're 30-40% tapped out on a channel, not even close, and then thinking about, okay, let's devote other resources. And what it does is, our perspective, to Tony's earlier point, is that every channel is incremental to some extent. So measure it and get the incrementality factor. And there's going to be some level of investment that works for every brand on every channel. It might be $1, it might be $1 million, it might be 10 million. So you have to go discover that. But there's incrementality available for every brand on every single channel. The main opportunity cost, though, is what the change in focus does to the organizational rhythm and the resourcing. That there are opportunity costs in all of these things when we have multiple additional channels that we're considering, additional teams devoted to those, additional tech stacks that we then have to go set up, and issues come about, additional things on the accounting side, because now we have TikTok shops and we have to pay out creator fees and this whole thing. Like there's an opportunity there. But if you just focused on how do we get to 9 figures on Meta and Google and build up the organizational rigor and focus around that, I think brands would see that they have a lot more available to them, with that being the key focus, rather than always in the back of our mind, okay, are we getting tapped out on Meta? Should we be exploring this? Oh, Criteo looks interesting. Let's spin it up next week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
sorry. When you said something, there's opportunity, and there's also opportunity cost, such as life, both sides of the coin. One more thing I want to add to the opportunity cost side, because some of the stuff that we're building over here at CTC is circling in on this. It takes approximately 60 clicks to build a campaign in Meta. It's a laborious process. So if you want to go over into Snap or TikTok or Pinterest or wherever else, there is the really basic understanding of the opportunity cost is 60 clicks times 60 clicks times 60 clicks times 60 clicks. And then connecting back to this idea of like your ability to scale into the channel and have it be effective, like the slope of that curve, how fast it's going to happen is going to be different. So if you're going to go into this other space, but sort of halfway, like foot in the water, like toe in the water, but not committed, you're kind of likely just wasting your time. You're better off get Meta and Google, push them as far as possible, and then go, all right, we're going to go make YouTube work.
Yeah.
Or Snap or Pinterest or whatever.
But basically in summary, like nail Meta and Google, and then you can kind of figure out your next steps from there. More or less. Cool. Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a few seconds here to talk to you about Admission, our membership program here at CTC that gives you access to one-on-one consultations with our growth experts, as well as weekly live events and access to our gated library of e-commerce trainings. This is the best way to work with us here at Common Thread Collective if you're in the 6 to 7 figure range. Now, to get started, all you have to do is book a call with me to talk more about it at youradmission.co. That's youradmission.co. All right, back to the show. All right, let's jump to another one here. So this is a question that we got recently that we've also gotten a lot, which is around CPMs. So CPMs often feel like they're sort of the kind of black box metric that you can't actually affect, blah, blah, blah. But okay, let's say CPMs just generally have started going up. Maybe they're going up disproportionately to what you might expect or what's been in the past. What should your next move be?
Ooh, there's so many. Okay, so the symptoms and gotta think of it better. The cause and effect isn't a good thing, but like what's a symptom and what's it resulting from? So there are a number of things that can affect CPMs. Here's one that we should all be aware of, which is when you optimize for click only on Meta versus click plus view, your CTR is going to increase dramatically, and your CPMs are also going to increase dramatically. Just as a function of you optimizing for click only, so 1 day click or 7 day click only, versus 7 day click 1 day view. And so now in this instance, I doubt that's the case but like why I bring it up is because the simple adjustment and optimization, and what that's going to lead to is like your CPCs are probably pretty similar, or in a tighter range of fluctuation relative to what they were, because your CTRs went up and your CPMs went up. Now in that case, what you're driving for a click-oriented objective, which click-oriented objective is has a higher incrementality factor than click plus view based on studies that we've seen. So that's to be expected. So you're getting charged more for that audience because they're of higher value. They're a more incremental audience. In that case, I want higher CPMs, probably, depending on the brand. As long as the campaigns are getting enough signal, I probably want higher CPMs because they come with the higher click-through rate and probably come with higher click-only ROAS and iROAS at the end of the day. Maybe. For larger brands, that's probably the case. I bring that up because that's an important one to highlight in terms of CPMs, good, bad. They don't live within higher CPMs being a negative signal or lower CPMs being a positive signal. It's all relative to the objective and the other metrics that then lead to what the end outcome is, which is the return on the ad spend. So that's how I just frame it up in terms of us looking at CPMs and projecting onto CPMs, our perspective that an increase or decrease is good, bad, or otherwise can be a really unhelpful exercise, because we haven't seen meaningful correlation in our data set of CPMs against ROAS, click-through rate against ROAS. These metrics aren't good predictors of what the efficiency outcome is. They're very loosely connected to what the efficiency outcome is, because they all live relative to one another, and things like optimizing for a different bid strategy can have a meaningful impact on the outcome. Now, that's more of a non-answer. Tony, do you have any thoughts to build on that and make that a more helpful answer?
Yeah, I mean, like the conversation around CPM or CPC for that matter, sort of, it just reminds me of the olden days, like pre-outcome based bidding. Controlling for those things was kind of like the only mechanism for control that you had. But we're a long way away from that. And, like the other thing about CPM and CPC, like the cost of the traffic, is the thing about these advertising platforms is like you're participating in an auction. And your participation in that auction against other advertisers is the other advertisers, the competitors are the primary thing that's impacting the cost of the traffic. And that's going to change completely outside of your control. So this is another non-answer, unfortunately, but it's one of those things where I feel like it's a place where digital marketers get stuck on a focus on one piece of information in a highly dynamic system, like a butterfly effect type system that, to Luke's point, doesn't show strong correlation to the final outcome, which is, ROAS or a CAC, which is what we're finally after. So it's like something that people talk about because it's something to look at, but I don't know how useful it is or how much that you can actually do to affect it. Here's a hot take. I got a hot take.
Yeah.
If you want to change your CPMs and you're selling like apparel or cosmetics, for example, go sell auto parts and you'll have an eighth of the CPM.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's exactly what I was going to do. Is like, okay, let's play the game for a second. I want to improve my CPMs dramatically. Okay. Now Tony and I gave all the caveats of why that's not, but whatever. Let's, for fun. So I want to increase my CPMs dramatically. What do? Run ads in the UAE, run ads in Bangladesh, run ads, start selling your products in Mexico. You're going to see dramatically
run display ads.
Yeah. But now, the point being, okay, now another one, I want to improve my CPMs dramatically. Launch a new product that's in a new category that serves a totally different customer base. The auto parts example is like a dramatic version of that. But let's say you sell primarily women's apparel, and then you launch fitness shoe that serves more of a male demographic. You're going to see lower CPMs relative to that male, and you've unlocked a net new audience. Those are the levers that are going to make dramatic impacts to the business overall, and which are actually going to reduce change in the CPM, not as the objective, but just the fruit of expanding the business in that way. So that's more to say, you want to do those things. You want to see a dramatic impact. This relates to the question earlier of like what to do when nothing's working. Do you expand internationally? Do you launch a whole new product category that serves a whole new audience subset that changes the economics of your business because you are competing in a different auction? Those are the things to think about. And then more tactically, you can request from Meta a share of voice report. I think that's what it's called, Tony. Correct me if I'm wrong, but share of voice, which shows over the past year, they can break it down by week, the auction dynamic and some of the other brands or competitors that are showing up in your auction and how that's changed over time. So helpful, similar to what Google will give. So you can diagnose like, okay, are there auction dynamics in play where there are other competitors entering the auction that are driving things up for me? You can't really do anything about that except for to understand what the players are doing that are affecting your category and niche, and then be able to have more competitive strategies in relation to that. So that'd be a tactical takeaway.
Yeah. You could, I mean, you could, to your point about the attribution thing, like go optimize for an upper funnel event, as opposed to a purchase. You're going to get lower CPMs and probably potentially lower quality traffic as well, which is kind of like we can just talk in circles about this forever.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like kind of like the CPMs are never a primary question to be solved, right?
Yeah.
Like they're only, unless like, so if you quote unquote want to solve CPMs, the way to, hold on. Can you hear my dog?
Yeah. Got a barker on our hands.
It's going crazy. Hold on.
Squirrel, mailman.
No, we have the neighbor dogs also bark. And so they bark at somebody passing by and then she barks at them. So
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle. But
Your dog's having a hot take right now.
yeah, I know, exactly. We'll have Mickey edit it out. She doesn't need to be on. She doesn't need to be on mic. She's already treated as enough of a princess here. But okay, so the point I was making is that like solving CPMs isn't necessarily like a primary issue to be solved, because like you're pointing out, Tony, like if you want to solve for CPMs, the idea is to go find cheaper inventory, right? And there are different ways to do that, but finding cheaper inventory may actually require you to change businesses altogether or unlock like an entirely new product line. And if you're doing that for the sole purpose of lowering CPMs, that's not a great reason to make a big business decision like that.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
yeah, I think Luke and I are kind of saying the same thing in different ways. Like the CPM is kind of the end node of the system, right? So, like the road leads back to product, offer, messaging. Those are the things that are gonna move the needle. And if you are in fact seeing CPMs that are rising dramatically over time, I think you have to ask yourself some questions about your product, your offer, your marketing calendar, and those sorts of things.
Yeah. And by the way, that doing this with any other metric, click-through rate or conversion rate in particular, will yield the same result, where there's many hours we've all spent in conversations around how do we improve conversion rate. And when you try to affect any one of these metrics in isolation from one another, you just end up creating a problem elsewhere. Okay, our conversion rate is higher, but now the problem is our AOV has dropped dramatically, or our click-through rate is below where it used to be, because these they all just oscillate. Like those metrics are pretty much baked for whatever your offer is to the customer audience you're going after. And the creative that you're running against it. So if you want to affect those things, have a new offer that gets after a different audience, and/or additional creative units of growth that help to impact those parts of the formula, rather than impacting the individual metrics themselves, because then what you're just gonna it's just whack-a-mole with those metrics.
Okay. Well, yeah, and that's an important general point to make, is that no one metric can be your North Star. Really, like they all they function more as a constellation.
Except for contribution margin. Hot
Except
take.
for contribution margin. Well, which is like, again, yeah, is the business successful or not? And you have to have some way of measuring that. But there's no one metric in the chain or in the chain that leads to contribution margin that's more important than the others. This whole kind of group of things that come around contribution margin.
If you're focused on CPM in a meta account, you're pretty far away. You're pretty long distance away from contribution margin.
Yeah. Okay. Let's. I'll ask you guys one final question here, which is interesting because it's both a bit of a life question while also being a tactical question. This is a question we got from somebody who was having an issue pitching cost caps to his boss. And he was like, how do I pitch cost caps to my boss to overcome his objection? His specific objection was, you're going to get a dip after 3 months because Meta is being so conservative that you're draining your data set. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to that or whatever, but that's the specific objection in this case. But let's have both of you guys pitch cost caps to your boss, who, let's say in this hypothetical scenario, is really reticent to do so. So let's start with you, Luke.
If I'm interested in the financial well-being of the business, I have an obligation and probably a vested interest in making sure that any dollar deployed has some expectation of return against that dollar as the core function. The objection that you referenced and the hesitation tied up in it, is exactly what I would want to have in place for the business to make sure that there is an expectation of return against the dollars being invested. Otherwise, there is not having cost controls of any type set on campaigns is there's no expectation of return. It's saying we're going to spend these dollars regardless of the outcome and giving a green light to do so. So the campaigns throttling spend back or getting a lower spend volume as a result is a feature, not a bug, because there's an expectation of return against those dollars. What it allows for is problem solving in a dimension that actually moves the business forward, rather than just increasing budgets or lowering bids as the lever to produce a different outcome, which is exactly what should be required of the broader team as well. If there's no cost control or expectation of return over time period, then the meta efficiency is below target. Well, the easiest lever is let's just drop the budget 20%. So the next few days, the efficiency is going to be there. But these are just bid and budget tweaks that we're doing on the campaigns. We're not actually launching anything net new. If there's a constraint of return on the campaigns, then what that does is you can't just go and start tweaking the budget and bid to be able to get to the outcome. What you have to do is net new creative volume, net new creative formats, more volume and diversity of creative, net new landing page and offers and funnels and things that actually produce a different business outcome that aren't just adjustments and to the bid and budgets of the campaign. So this is exactly what I would want, which is there's an expectation of return against the dollars being invested. And it also allows for problem solving in a way that creates something net new and taking the energy and the focus away from tweaks to bids and budgets as a means of gaining that outcome.
Tony?
Yeah. Hot take. I'm pretending I'm the person in this question talking to my boss. I believe we can 2x our monthly meta budget run rate in 3 to 6 months as a result of deploying this strategy. It's going to require, to Luke's point, that we shift our focus into creating net new offers, net new creative. And I'm going to do that 2xing of the budget run rate while also increasing contribution margin as I go. So I'm going to scale the budget profitably. And this is the hardest thing to do. This is what we're tasked to do for our clients all the time. It's really, really easy to spend more media dollars. It's the easiest thing to do in the world, actually. What's really, really, really hard to do is to scale media budgets while also scaling the bottom line output in concert together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I wanted to be really crazy, I would say whatever. Let's say our media budget is $100,000 a month. I'd say, all right, well, let's try 150,000 on highest volume and see what happens to the bottom line. And then let's try to get through $150,000 with a decent amount of that going through cost control and see what happens to the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like, to summarize a little bit of what you both are saying, adding cost caps to your account forces you to solve actual business problems rather.
It makes things harder.
Yeah, well, exactly. And if you actually solve an account with cost caps, you will have actually solved the real business problem, as opposed to solving like maybe a account on highest volume or whatever. You solve like a ROAS issue by lowering budget. You've increased your ROAS, which is great, I guess, but that doesn't actually have any real impact outside of the account, or maybe even has a negative impact.
Well, you've just traded volume and you've just traded one thing for the other. So ROAS is higher, but spend volume is lower. So this outcome is the same for or it might be degraded. So you haven't actually created anything incremental in that instance. Bid and budget changes don't do that. Deploying net new units of growth in the form of creative, volume, diversity, offers, angles, landing pages, et cetera, are the things that are actually going to create incremental value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The pushback we always get is, of course, like, particularly on smaller accounts, is like, I'm not getting enough spend. And I feel like the pushback or the rebuttal you guys are giving is like, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
If you can get spend on cost caps, that's what you want. You don't want to get spend not on cost caps. The point of having it, or the goal of a meta ads account is to get spend while running cost caps. And if you're able to do that.
Let's just clarify and use cost control, because
controls.
Minro satisfies the same criteria.
Yeah. All right. I think that'll do it for us for this week. So appreciate everybody listening in. And real quick note, remember, if you want your questions answered on the pod, go ahead and call, leave us a voicemail or a text at 866-DTC-2263. And we might play or read your question on a subsequent episode. But all right, until next time, for Luke the Weatherman Austin, for Tony the Chopper Chop, put him on, Tony. I'm Richard Gaffin, coming to you from outer space. Take care, everybody. See you next week.